salty ocean, off where the waves roll free. The sparkling water rises, then crashes to the sea. Out amongst the breakers, you'll have no need to fear. It's true, it's the blue frontier.
Welcome to another episode of Rising Tide, the Ocean podcast. This is David Helvarg, and I'm here again with Natasha Benjamin. Hi, Natasha.
Hi, David.
And we're pleased to be talking with Destiny Bristol Kushin and Zinaida Mel, her grandmother. They're residents of St. Paul, the largest of the Pribilof Islands, located in the Bering Sea, 300 miles off the Alaskan mainland. Destiny is a 20-year-old college student working toward her associate's degree in environmental scientist. Zinaida is an elder who has lived on the island almost all her life. She and her granddaughter are here to talk about the environmental changes they've seen in their lifetimes. With a population of just under 400, St. Paul's a fishing community that is experiencing rapid environmental change, bringing new challenges to everyone's life. Welcome and thank you for joining us. Before we get into those challenges, maybe you could just tell us a little about what it was like in your childhoods growing up, living with and surrounded by the ocean.
In my days, the village was full of people. Now it's all changed. Most everybody I knew are all gone. They're all gone. They all died. Now it's all the new generations coming in. In the olden days, when I was growing up, the elders used to talk about how remote we were, how we never had planes come in. We had mail drops by the plane. We'd have a supply boat come in every 3-4 months. They bring all our supplies, and we were rationed. There's food. I remember my parents never talked about how much hard time they were having. The olden days were better than the days that are now today. We had a lot of respect for the elders. Everybody helped each other. My dad was a fisherman. He was a mechanic. He'd go out fishing with his cousins, uncles, and they'd go out and bring a bunch of halibut, and they'd feed the community. They'd give out the halibut. They'd go out and get some seal meat. They give it to the community. They helped each other. That's how I grew up. I'm like my parents now. I like to help people. I open my door for anybody. That's how my parents were. That's how I grew up, even though we had hard times. But, like I always say, leave the past alone. You can't bring it back. But I miss them good old days.
Things have changed, and you said that a lot of the folks on the island have left or are gone. Mm-hmm. So the population used to be much higher on the island. Can you talk about how the community has changed and how things on the island are changing for the community and the fishermen?
It's getting scary. I've never seen it like this before. Dad and them guys would go out hunting, go out birds. They'd bring 50, 60 birds, murres. You call them cormorants. They'd bring all those. And we used to go across to the dock on the east side. We'd go out there and get them little auklets. We called them chushkis. We'd get up 4 o'clock in the morning, go out there and use a bamboo stick and knock them birds down. And they were a pain in the butt to pluck and clean. There's 6 of us girls, and we had to pluck. Mom taught us how to pluck the birds. Those were good eatings.
Were there more birds and seals and fish?
Yes. I used to hear this one old lady. She used to say, look at all these planes and then people coming in from the outside. Now I'm starting to understand what she was trying to say. I see it. The outsiders are coming in, bringing in diseases, sicknesses. Everybody's getting sick. They never had those to worry about in them days because they only had that one supply boat that would come in, bring our food.
We have ace planes and barges that bring up stuff.
So, Destiny, there's a lot of changes in your grandmother's life, but you were telling us before, even in your life, like the summers have changed.
Even in the last 20 years since I was born, you could see the differences in the environment, especially with the seasons. Our summers will be later. Our winters aren't as snowy. It's mostly wet now, like rain and snow all during the wintertime.
Everything's declining, even our mossberries, berries, the cloudberries, everything's.
The berries are very dependent on the snowfall throughout the wintertime. And that's due to the amount of water that comes from that.
The island is mostly made out of lava, rock, volcanic rock, and berries. We used to have berries all over, all around the island. Now, scarce, and no more. We don't have as much snow as we used to. I remember growing up, my front door would be covered with snow. The snow would reach our roof.
Me and my cousins used to play behind my kuka's house, and we'd be able to climb on the snowbanks and get onto the roof and jump off into the snowbanks from the top. We used to build little snow houses in the back.
They were making igloos.
Mm-hmm. And now it's like, you can't really do that. There's barely enough snow to go sledding.
And you're seeing that in your short memory of time there. And you also mentioned that the ice pack has changed.
We haven't had the ice packs around the island since 2012. And you can see the differences or the impact it's having on our cliffs and our shorelines, because the ice pack prevents erosion, because we have really bad winter storms. And it's a lot of wind and waves now, and there's not really any ice to stop those waves from hitting the cliffs throughout the entire year. So now there's more erosion and rockfall in those areas.
And I've just gotten back from Napakiak village on the YK Delta tundra, and they're moving half their village to the west side because of erosion. So this is all climate that's changing.
It's not just the changes that we see, it's the changes that we don't see. Like you don't really notice until it's gone, like the seal population and the birds. Because like whenever they're talking about summer, like the elders, they'll say that the cliffs used to be covered in white from bird poop. And now it's like you see a few birds. There's not really any coverage over there. There's no, I don't know. It's like, because we have a annual thing where you go out and get murre eggs and you give out to people. And now we don't really get murre eggs. Like they used to come back with thousands of murre eggs from like a different island. They used to fill up those open skin boats from an island that's about 8 miles away. And they would come back and give them out. But now we get maybe 30, 40 a year.
30 or 40 eggs in total.
When I was younger, we used to fill up those tin buckets, those big fishing buckets, and you'd layer it with grass and eggs all the way up to the top. Now you don't really have to do that anymore. You can fill up a tiny box.
The crab population also collapsed a few years ago. They shut down the processing plant. So how are people coping with that, just in terms of the jobs for fishing and processing and crabbing?
It's getting tough. The entities, we used to have the city office, the city, St. Paul, the Tanagusa Corporation. Now our tribal government is running the island now. There's more workers, and we finally took over the store. The local store used to be run under AC. So now the tribe owns the store, and oh my word, it's so ridiculous.
Everything's so expensive. Like a carton of milk, not even a gallon of milk. They don't sell gallons here. They only sell like the carton.
Quarts.
And that's around $15, $16. Dozen of eggs.
$12.
It's a lot of frozen food because we don't really eat as much as they used to, like seal and all that stuff. So our community is mostly based on processed food. And you can see the health changes that it's had on our people. You have a lot more people who have heart disease and diabetes and high cholesterol, high blood pressure, all those things. And it's starting to become a family thing. It's like running in your family now. And that's why a lot of younger kids are susceptible to heart attacks and diabetes. And they have a lot of programs here that are trying to help with like nutrition and healthy eating.
Everybody knows me for my traditional food. We have harvest once a year in June, July. I go out to the harvest.
The harvests are throughout the summer, but it's only during the summer. It's a community thing. In other places, they'll do like single family hunts, but with the harvests here, we do community harvests. So that way everybody could get their seal at once. Since the seals are a protected species, they have a lot of regulations on when we can go out and when we can get it. So it's still heavily regulated by the government because it's a protected species.
The history of the seal hunt and how that's changed? Can you
Well, in the olden days, the government ran the harvest. I remember waking Dad up 4:00 in the morning. They'd go out to have breakfast at 5. They'd have a bunkhouse. It was only men that went out to harvest. They'd go have breakfast. I remember Dad going out 6:00 in the morning and don't come home till 6 in the evening. They used to get thousands of seals for the government, just for the pelts. Dad and them would bring a bunch of seals. We'd get ready for the winter. They salt the seal, the flipper. For the winter, they'd have barrels, big barrels, and salt, rock salt. That's how we made our salted seal and seal flippers. I remember they used to have some outsiders come in and do the blubbering. The government would pay people from Nikolsky, Akatan, Atka come in and do some blubbering, working on the seal skins. All the government was worried about was the skins.
So this is when there was a commercial harvest for seals before the 80s.
So first the Russians and then the American government were harvesting just for the skins and not the full animal for food and other uses.
We'd have a big plant, we called it the byproducts. The government would take the whole seal carcass and grind it up and send it out to lower 48. They call it mink food. They cook and grind the whole seal, bones and all.
To feed it to mink farms, more commercial activity. When did you get control back when did the government get out of that business?
In 1986.
Yeah.
I used to work in a processing plant where they did the seal. I think I tried everything. I went halibut fishing. Women weren't allowed in them days. Nowadays, women go do everything. They go hunt like Destiny, go out and get me seal. She go halibut fishing, get more eggs. Women in them days, they were just stayed home, took care of the house and the kids. Women weren't allowed. She was really strict in them days because our church.
Mm-hmm.
It was hard in them days, but we managed.
And now your granddaughter goes hunting and fishing. And what is seal flipper? How do you cook and prepare that?
We use the small seal flippers. We ferment it and then we salt it. The Eskimos, I heard they put them in the ground. They don't salt it. They just let it stay there until it gets stink or till they ferment. But then we have ours ferment and then we salt it.
It's kind of gross, but you let it sit and then
brine, like a brine.
So it's like a jerky when it's done?
Kind of pickled.
Yeah. I remember eating whale. We hardly ever got whales around here, but Dad and them would find a whale come up on the beach. They'd get chunks of the whale meat, the blubber.
Mm-hmm.
I think I've seen the meat, but the blubber, Dad and them used to salt it, cut it in chunks, and then barrel it with salt. I didn't care too much for it when I was young. My sisters and brother would be running around chewing it like bubble gum. I tried it. To me, it tasted like cod liver oil.
Yep.
Acquired tastes.
Do you love the salty characters and ocean champions we have on the Rising Tide? So do we, and we're dedicated to bringing inspiring stories and voices that make waves. But here's the catch. We need your support to keep the tide rolling. A tax-deductible donation at bluefront.org will help keep the Rising Tide on the air and online. If you're ready and able to amplify these salty voices for the sea, dive in with a donation, big or small. Visit bluefront.org and join the movement. And now, back to the show.
You were telling us about your work in terms of managing the resources and working with some of the government agencies and creating indigenous marine stewardship areas. Can you tell us a little bit about what's happening?
So since I've been working with the tribe, right now we're working on designating an IMSA, Indigenous Marine Stewardship Area. And this would be something that is designated by our tribe and our tribe only, not through federal or state government. which essentially means that we would have the power in decision making and telling people like, this is what we've established this area as. And essentially it'd be a protected area around the islands. We're trying to include St. George in there, but there's some miscommunication because of the relationship that St. Paul and St. George have due to government influence. So that's also a struggle. But right now, yeah, we're just trying to get an area established so that way people who aren't supposed to be around here and people who are around here, like fishing industries, they understand that this is a protected area because it has our vital resources like our seal and our birds and everything that's essential to the passing on of our tradition.
You have to have recognition of tribal control of your own waters.
Yeah. Because if it's still under state or federal, then people aren't going to want to support it because of the past relationship with the government.
Right. So this is a different mechanism to create protections, to acknowledge kind of the tribe's relationship with the resource and the water, and also protect it from certain activities.
And the rookeries and the bird cliffs are still under the government.
And under the fisheries section, you would think like, oh, we have a commercial fishing fleet, but it's not the same like as an industrial fishing fleet. Ours is solely based on people who have lived here, people who know this place and respect this place. And as a people, our commercial fishing fleet respects the water. We thank God. We thank everything for the resources that we get. So that's why fishing is a big part of our community. And the fishing industry here was established in the 90s when the government gave us money to buy boats. So they gave families money and they called it corned beef money. And they used that to establish a fishing industry here.
You have a number of boats and the resources shared out by the fishing group on the island.
There's not as many fishermen and captains as there used to be. There's a boatyard here that has all the old boats, and there's like maybe 10, 15 boats that still fish.
And it's primarily halibut?
Yeah, it's only halibut that we fish. We don't fish for crab. That's the other fisheries. But the economy is solely based on the crab industry and the halibut industry.
And the crab was commercial but processed on the island. So that was jobs that have been lost since the crab collapsed.
Trident mostly had people from the outside that came in, like from the Philippines and from other areas.
So that loss didn't impact your population as much.
Not necessarily the population. People move out for many reasons, whether it be like
costs of living
or not enough jobs or not enough resources.
housing.
So what's the status? Do you think the indigenous control of the waters will happen? And how does that become official?
I'm just hoping that it happens. I think the only thing that's really holding us back is the agreement within the community. So I feel like it's a fear that people don't really know what's going to happen that is holding them back or regulating. They think that it's going to regulate the fisheries, which it wouldn't.
So is there some pushback from the community right now in this process?
Mostly the entities that are pushing back because we know that they're thinking about the community and what's best for the community, but they don't really understand. And it's a lot of things that happen with miscommunication. And so that's why we're working on getting a committee with a few people from each entity to fully understand what we're doing.
Bring people together, try to have these discussions and come to some understanding.
Like it used to be in the olden days. That's what the people did together. They did it all together. But then they hid away from the government. That's how we got the tribal government. There's people, hiding from the government. People, and we created a tribal government.
That's how the change comes. Where I was doing this story in Napakiak, they have a 50-year plan for climate retreat and adaptation. They said they started it when they got all their entities together to agree within the village. And then they said some of these outside funders came, they were all in agreement, and then a storm hit. And the outsider said, "Oh, we have to fund you because we're in a storm."
These plans for protected areas have been around for 20, 30 years now. And they've been talking about the same thing since before I was born. It's kind of crazy to see that they're still talking about it now and I get to work on something like this.
it's important work, but that it's been going on longer than you've been alive is amazing. But I think the other thing is just that climate change is so real. I mean, that it's not just changing your grandma's life, but your life, and so fast that, people in the lower 48, even as it's happening, some say climate change isn't real, but
it's because the Arctic is affected so much faster than the lower 48 areas. But now they're starting to see more storms and everything on the East Coast. And maybe that'll show them that climate change is happening very fast and it's going to be inevitable at some point. But
I remember growing up, the elders used to talk about things like this. I never understood. Now I'm starting to see what they were talking about.
Right.
And I'm trying to tell the younger ones. They get mad at me, call me old-fashioned.
Well, it sounds like Destiny's following in your footsteps and also forging her own path in terms of getting involved in the IMSA and the field work that she's doing. It's pretty incredible. And Destiny, how are you feeling about kind of your future on the island and the work that you're doing? What do you hope to achieve?
I feel like, to me, like the statement that I made at the last tribal council meeting was that I was asking people in the room how many of their families were fishermen, how many of their dads and their uncles, and how many of them are fishermen. Because when we learn how to fish, we're very young. I started fishing when I was 11. And I learned from my dad and my uncles and my cousins. And I asked them, I was like, that it's a big part of our tradition to be fishermen. And it was mostly the people I was asking that were against like a protected area. And so I really wanted to bring up the fact that we need to protect these areas, because if you want to pass that tradition down to your kids, or if you already have, I want that fair opportunity and that fair chance to teach my kids how to do these things.
I watched my dad. I was right behind my dad. Even though I wasn't supposed to go to the harvest, we'd sneak on one of the trucks they go out with. We're out there in the tundra, already out there. We no way to come back to town. So Dad showed me how to cut parts of the seal. Now I know, thanks to my mom and dad, I know how to cook native food.
Now that me and my cousins and my friends are all older, we know how to go out and get seal if we want it. And it's really cool because this might be illegal, but we would stay at the camp house sometimes, and they have a wood stove out there. And one time it was all of us, we were under the age of 18, 19, and we went out and got a seal. I had my cousins shoot it. My other cousin, we taught him how to cut it up so he could give it to us. And then I finished cutting it up and cooked it, and we all ate it. So that was like a good moment for all of us to experience.
It must have been empowering, Destiny, for you and your cousins to have that experience, to hunt the food, collect the food, cook it, provide for your family. I mean, this is what has been happening for generations and is becoming more difficult now with the changes.
It's not even in just that sense, too. I mean, I grew up going to the seal harvests with my mom, my kuka, my dad. And that's the main reason that I know how to do everything I know how to do.
So you have a healthy tradition with seal and halibut and birds and bird eggs that were healthy foods. You don't have to spend a fortune on processed foods that make you unhealthy. So you're trying to do with the marine protection is protect that cultural tradition. You've been good resource managers for thousands of years. So why wouldn't you be?
My grandson moved out. He said, "You darn kids are spoiled by Walmart and Safeway. My Walmart and Safeway is the rookeries. Where I get my meat."
A lot of kids were like expanding on the things that we don't really know how to eat. So like a few years ago, we started going out and getting limpets. And that's the thing that people used to do all the time. But we finally went out and decided to go get some. I think I started when I was maybe 15, 14. And we went out, got some. I brought them back. My dad was like, "Oh, you can cook it like this." So then we tried it boiled. We tried it fried. And it was so good.
Amazing.
And people hadn't been picking limpets for a long time.
We'll go out, like a few kids, we'll go out sometimes and get sea urchins.
Mm-hmm.
we'll come back and eat it. Like, especially during Father's Day, like we'll go out and we'll get some, because we have a Father's Day bonfire and grilling out of town.
Tundra.
And there's like these tide pools at the bottom that you have to walk to, and we'll walk down there. We'll get some sea urchins and we'll bring them back up and usually share them with people who are at the bonfire and just eat the eggs and everything.
So are you confident with populations down and you have all these challenges that climate's making worse, but it sounds like people want to stay on and keep tradition alive?
Some kids want to leave and they don't understand that once they leave, they're going to miss being here. And I realized that very quick when I started going to school. And I was in Juneau, all these other places, you get homesick and it's really bad. Having a sense of community and being surrounded by people you know constantly. And then going out into the city, not really knowing anybody, or going out into other places, not really knowing anybody and not having those connections anymore.
So you're home now and you hope to stay home? You want to protect your island and your waters?
Yeah, I want to stay here.
I just want to thank you both for spending time with us on the Rising Tide Ocean podcast. This was wonderful. Thank you, Destiny, and your grandmother. Fascinating story of what's happening in Alaska. And thank you so much for spending time with us today.
Thanks for having us.
Rising Tide, the Ocean Podcast, is a production of Blue Frontier, co-hosted by Blue Frontier's David Halbard and Vicki Nichols Goldstein of the Inland Ocean Coalition, with production support from Holden Hardcastle of Fluid Studios, Natasha Benjamin, and Nick Paz, and editing services provided by Charles Landon of Studio Cape May. You can find Rising Tide at bluefront.org or on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you download your podcast. And don't forget to recommend the Rising Tide Ocean podcast to your friends and other ocean lovers.
Off in the salty ocean, off where the waves roll free. The sparkling water rises, then crashes to the sea. Out amongst the breakers, you'll have no need to fear. It's true, it's the blue frontier. Off in the salty ocean, off to the blue frontier.
Sparky, come here, buddy. Sparky. There you are. Good boy, Sparky.